The gunshot that shattered the window of the boarding house sent Eleanor Matthews scrambling into the darkest corner of her room, her hands instinctively covering the small swell of her belly that no loose dress could hide much longer. She was 5 months along now, unmarried, and running from a man who would rather see her dead than let her escape with the truth of what he had done. Marshal Wade Kellerman was not just the law in Dodge City, Kansas. He was a tyrant who wore a badge, and Eleanor had made the fatal mistake of believing his promises of marriage before discovering he already had a wife back east and a reputation for making inconvenient women disappear. The October wind of 1878 carried the scent of hay and horses through the broken window as Eleanor heard boots thundering up the wooden stairs. She had perhaps 30 seconds before Wade's men would kick down her door. Her carpetbag was already packed, had been for 3 days, ever since she overheard Wade telling his deputy that she knew too much and that accidents happened to women in her condition all the time. Without thinking, Eleanor threw open the window and climbed onto the narrow ledge, her heart hammering so hard she feared it might harm the baby. The alley below was too far to jump, but the roof of the livery stable next door was close enough that she could leap if she did not think about the consequences of missing. She jumped. The impact knocked the wind from her lungs as she landed hard on the slanted roof, scrambling for purchase on the weathered shingles. Behind her, she heard the door to her room splinter open and men's voices shouting. Eleanor slid down the opposite side of the livery roof, catching herself on the edge and dropping into the bed of a hay wagon. She burrowed into the loose straw just as the back door of the livery burst open. Through the gaps in the hay, she could see 2 of Wade's deputies, their faces twisted with frustration as they scanned the alley. She could not have gone far, one of them growled. The marshal wants her found tonight. Maybe she is hiding in one of these buildings, the other replied. Eleanor held her breath, pressing herself deeper into the hay as their boots crunched on the gravel just feet from the wagon. After what felt like an eternity, they moved on, their voices fading as they searched further down the alley. She waited until full darkness had fallen before carefully extracting herself from the hay wagon, her dress covered in straw and dust. The livery stable loomed beside her, its large doors slightly ajar. Inside, she could hear the soft sounds of horses settling for the night. Slipping through the gap, Eleanor found herself in the warm darkness of the stable. The smell of leather, horse, and fresh hay enveloped her like a blanket. She could not stay in town. Wade would have every building searched by morning. But she could not leave on foot either, not in her condition, not with at least 50 miles of open prairie between here and the nearest town where Wade's influence did not reach. Her only option was to hide until she could figure out a plan. The ladder to the hayloft was steep and challenging to climb, but Eleanor managed it, pulling herself up into the darkness above. The loft was filled with loose hay, bales stacked against the walls and small openings that let in slivers of moonlight. She made herself a nest in the far corner, covering herself with hay for warmth. Her whole body trembled, not just from cold but from fear and exhaustion. She placed both hands on her belly, feeling the slight flutter of movement that had started just last week. "We are going to be all right," she whispered to the child. "I promise you we will find a way." Sleep came in fits and starts, each sound from below making her jolt awake in terror. When dawn began to creep through the cracks in the barn walls, Eleanor heard the stable doors open and the sound of someone moving among the horses. She held perfectly still, barely breathing as footsteps crossed the floor below. Then she heard the creak of the ladder. Someone was climbing up. Eleanor pressed herself against the wall, her heart racing as a man's hat appeared, then his shoulders. He was tall, she could tell even from her position, with dark hair that needed cutting and several days' worth of stubble on his strong jaw. He wore the typical garb of a working cowboy, worn denim pants, a faded blue shirt, leather vest and boots that had seen better days. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with the kind of weathered face that came from years under the prairie sun. He spotted her immediately. For a long moment they stared at each other, Eleanor frozen in fear, the cowboy's brown eyes widening in surprise. Then, slowly, he held up both hands in a gesture of peace. "Easy now," he said, his voice low and calm, the kind of voice used to soothe skittish horses. "I am not going to hurt you." Eleanor tried to scramble backward, but there was nowhere to go. The cowboy stayed where he was, half on the ladder, giving her space. "My name is James Dalton," he said. "I work here at the stable. I came up to throw down some hay for the horses, that is all. But I can see you are in some kind of trouble. Please," Eleanor's voice came out as barely a whisper, "please do not tell anyone I am here." James studied her face, and she saw the exact moment his gaze traveled down to notice the swell of her belly beneath the hay-covered dress. Something shifted in his expression, a softness replacing the initial surprise. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head. "Are you hungry?" This time she nodded, and James saw her eyes fill with tears. He climbed the rest of the way into the loft, moving slowly so as not to startle her, and settled himself on a hay bale a respectful distance away. "Listen," he said quietly. "I do not know what you are running from, and maybe it is none of my business. But I can tell you are scared, and you look like you have not eaten in a day or more. Why do not you let me bring you some food, and then we can figure out what to do next?" "Why would you help me?" Eleanor asked, suspicious despite her desperate need. James was quiet for a moment, his gaze dropping to his hands. "My sister was in trouble once," he said finally. "She was younger than you, I think, and she was scared, and she did not have anyone to help her. She died trying to take care of things on her own." He looked up, meeting Eleanor's eyes. "So if I can help someone else's sister, maybe that counts for something." There was such genuine pain in his voice that Eleanor felt something in her chest crack open. She started to cry, great shaking sobs that she had been holding back for weeks. James stayed where he was, not trying to touch her or comfort her physically, just sitting there as a solid, steady presence while she fell apart. When the tears finally subsided, Eleanor wiped her face with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of dirt across her cheek. "I am sorry," she said. "Nothing to be sorry for," James replied. "But I need to get downstairs before Mr. Henderson, the stable owner, comes in and wonders why I am not working. You stay hidden up here and I will bring you something to eat as soon as I can manage it. Can you do that?" Eleanor nodded. "And miss," James added, already starting down the ladder, "whatever you are running from, whatever trouble you are in, you are safe now here. I give you my word." Those words, spoken with such simple conviction, were the first thing in 3 days that made Eleanor believe she might actually survive this. James was true to his word. Within an hour, he returned to the loft with a cloth bundle containing biscuits, cheese, and dried apple slices, along with a canteen of water. Eleanor ate ravenously while James kept watch from the ladder, ready to warn her if anyone approached. "How long have you been running?" he asked quietly. Eleanor hesitated, then decided she owed him at least some of the truth. 3 days since I left my room, weeks before that since I realized I needed to leave. And the baby's father is not a good man," Eleanor said firmly. "He is a man who uses his power to hurt people, and I will not let him hurt my child." James nodded slowly, not pressing for more details. "You cannot stay in this loft forever," he said. "Wade Kellerman's men were searching the streets this morning, asking questions about a young woman. They are offering a reward." Eleanor's blood ran cold. "You know it is Wade," she breathed. "I guessed," James admitted. "The marshal has a reputation. You are not the first woman to run from him, though you might be the first to get away." He was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I have a friend who runs a ranch about 60 miles west of here, near the Colorado border. He owes me a favor, and his wife is a good woman. They would take you in, no questions asked, let you stay until the baby comes and after if you need it. Why are you doing this?" Eleanor asked again, searching his face for some hidden motive. "Because it is the right thing to do," James said simply. And because I have been in Dodge City for 2 years now, and I have seen what Wade Kellerman is capable of. If you are running from him, then you have every right to run, and you deserve help. Over the next 3 days, James brought Eleanor food and water, blankets to keep her warm at night, and news from the town. Wade had his men searching every building, questioning everyone, but so far, no one had thought to search the hayloft where a young cowboy worked. James and Eleanor talked during those visits, at first just practical things about plans and logistics, but gradually, more personal conversations emerged. Eleanor learned that James had come west from Missouri after his parents died, that he had worked cattle drives and ranch work, and any honest job he could find, saving money with dreams of having his own small spread someday. He was 26, just 3 years older than Eleanor's 23, and he had a quiet, steady way about him that made her feel safe in a way she had never experienced before, not even before Wade had shown his true colors. James learned that Eleanor had been a schoolteacher, that she loved books and had dreams of starting a school of her own someday, that she played piano though she had not touched one in months, and that the baby growing inside her was the only good thing that had come from her time with Wade, even though the circumstances were terrible. He watched the way her face softened when she talked about the child, the way her hands would unconsciously rest on her belly, and something in his chest tightened with an emotion he was not quite ready to name. On the 4th night, James climbed into the loft after the stable had closed, carrying not just food but a change of clothes. Boys' clothes, he explained, that would help her travel without being recognized. "We are leaving tomorrow night," he said. "I have arranged everything. There is a freight wagon heading west at dawn the day after tomorrow, but we need to get you out of town tomorrow night when there are fewer people watching. I have 2 horses ready, supplies packed, and a route plan that will keep us off the main roads." "We," Eleanor repeated. "James, you cannot leave your job, your life here, just to help me." "I am not leaving just to help you," James said, and there was something in his voice that made Eleanor's breath catch. "I am leaving because staying in a town run by a man like Wade Kellerman makes me sick to my stomach, and I have been looking for a good reason to move on. You just gave me that reason." He paused, then added more softly, "And because over these past few days, I have come to care about what happens to you and that baby. I want to see you safe, Eleanor. Let me do that." No one had spoken her name with such tenderness in so long that Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes again. "I do not have money to pay you," she said. "I am not asking for money." "Then what are you asking for?" James looked at her steadily in the dim light. "Just a chance to help, that is all. After we get you to my friend's ranch, if you want me to leave, I will leave. But let me get you there safe first." The next night was moonless, which was exactly what they needed. James came to the loft just after midnight, dressed for travel with 2 horses saddled and ready in the alley behind the stable. Eleanor had changed into the boy's clothes, her long auburn hair braided and tucked up under a hat. She looked like a young ranch hand, at least from a distance, though the swell of her belly would give her away to anyone looking closely. "Ready?" James asked, offering his hand to help her down the ladder. Eleanor took his hand, feeling the calluses from years of hard work, the strength in his grip. "Ready," she said, though her heart was pounding. They made it out of Dodge City without incident, keeping to the shadows and back alleys until they reached the open prairie. Once clear of town, James set a steady pace westward, not too fast to tire the horses but fast enough to put distance between them and any potential pursuit. Eleanor rode well enough, having learned as a girl, but pregnancy had shifted her balance and made long hours in the saddle more difficult. James seemed to sense this, calling for regular stops to rest and stretch. As dawn broke over the endless grass, they made camp in a small copse of cottonwood trees near a creek. James built a small fire, cooked bacon and beans, and made coffee that tasted better than anything Eleanor had eaten in weeks, probably because it was the first meal in days where she did not have to worry about being discovered. "Tell me about your friend." Eleanor said as they ate. "The one whose ranch we are going to." "His name is Thomas Brennan," James said. "I met him on a cattle drive 4 years ago. We worked together for 2 seasons, and he saved my life when a stampede nearly trampled me." After that drive, he married a woman named Catherine, and her father gave them a small ranch as a wedding present. They raise horses now, good stock, and they have built a decent life. He smiled slightly. "Catherine is from Boston originally, came west to teach school actually, so you two will have that in common. She is kind and she will not judge you." "And they will just take me in?" Eleanor asked. "A stranger, pregnant and unmarried, with a marshal possibly searching for her." "They will take you in because I am asking them to," James said with quiet confidence. "And because they are good people. Thomas has no love for corrupt lawmen, he will understand." They traveled for 5 days, moving steadily west across the Kansas plains toward Colorado. Each night James made camp, always choosing spots with good cover and water. He was attentive to Eleanor's needs without being overbearing, seeming to understand instinctively when she needed rest, when she needed to talk, and when she needed silence. They shared stories around the campfire, Eleanor talking about her childhood in Illinois, her parents who had died of fever when she was 18, her dreams of teaching. James spoke about life on the trail, about the beauty and brutality of the open range, about his hope of someday having a piece of land to call his own. On the 6th morning, Eleanor woke to find James already up, staring out at the horizon with a troubled expression. "What is wrong?" she asked, pulling her blanket around her shoulders against the morning chill. "We are being followed," James said quietly. 2 riders, maybe 3. I spotted their campfire last night and they are keeping pace with us." Eleanor's blood ran cold. "Wade's men, maybe. Or just travelers going the same direction, but I do not want to take chances." James turned to her. "There is a town about 15 miles south of here, small place called Ridgewood. We could swing down there, see if we can lose them in town, or at least get a better look at who they are." But before they could break camp, the riders appeared on the ridge behind them. Even at a distance, Eleanor recognized the build of one of them. Deputy Frank Mason, one of Wade's most loyal men and the same deputy who had searched the alley the night she escaped. "James," she breathed. "That is them, that is Wade's deputy." James did not hesitate. "Mount up now," he said, already throwing dirt on the fire and grabbing the saddles. Within minutes, they were riding hard south, pushing the horses as fast as they dared. Behind them, the deputies gave chase, clearly no longer concerned with subtlety. The chase lasted for over an hour, a desperate race across open grassland. Eleanor clung to her horse, fear and adrenaline driving her forward even as her body protested the strain. James stayed close beside her, his face set with determination. They were nearing a line of hills when a shot rang out, the bullet whizzing past Eleanor's head close enough that she felt the air displace. "Into the rocks!" James shouted, veering toward an outcropping of boulders at the base of the hills. They dismounted in a scramble, James pulling his rifle from its scabbard as the deputies closed in. There were 3 of them, Eleanor could see now, all armed. "Eleanor Matthews," Deputy Mason called out, reining in his horse about 50 yards away. "The marshal wants you back in Dodge City. Come peacefully, and no one needs to get hurt." "She is not going anywhere with you," James called back, his rifle trained on Mason. "This is not your business, Cowboy," Mason replied. "The woman is wanted for questioning. Hand her over and you can ride away." "Questioning?" James's voice was hard with contempt. "We both know she would not make it back to Dodge alive. Wade Kellerman is not getting his hands on her." "Then you are making a bad choice," Mason said, and there was genuine regret in his voice. "Wade wants her dead or alive, and he is not particular which, but he will pay extra for alive, so I am giving you one more chance to step aside." Eleanor could see James's jaw clench, his finger on the trigger. "You need to leave," he said quietly. "Now." What happened next occurred in seconds but felt like hours. Mason reached for his gun and James fired. The shot caught Mason in the shoulder, knocking him from his horse. The other two deputies opened fire, bullets pinging off the rocks around them. James returned fire, calm and methodical, each shot carefully placed. Eleanor crouched behind a boulder, her hands over her belly, praying desperately that they would survive this. One of the deputies fell, clutching his leg. The third, seeing his companions wounded and facing a cowboy who clearly knew how to shoot, turned his horse and rode hard back the way they had come. James watched until the deputy was out of rifle range, then lowered his weapon. His hands, Eleanor noticed, were rock steady. He turned to her. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, unable to speak. "We need to go," James said, already moving to check on the wounded deputies. Mason was conscious, his face pale with pain and anger. "You are making a big mistake," he spat at James. "Wade will hunt you both to the ends of the earth." "Maybe," James said, removing the deputies' weapons and tossing them into the brush. "But not today." He took the deputies' horses, sending them running off across the plain, then helped Eleanor back onto her mount. "Can you ride?" "Yes," Eleanor managed, though she was shaking. They rode hard for another 3 hours, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the wounded deputies. When they finally stopped to rest the horses, Eleanor slid from her saddle and immediately doubled over, gasping for breath. James was at her side instantly. "Eleanor, what is wrong? Are you hurt? Is it the baby?" "No," she managed. "I am just scared, James. I am so scared. Those men, they really will kill me, and now they will kill you too because you helped me." James took her shoulders gently, waiting until she looked up at him. "Hey," he said softly, "look at me. I am not going to let anything happen to you or that baby. Do you understand me? We are going to get to the Brennan Ranch, and you are going to be safe, and Wade Kellerman can go straight to hell." Eleanor stared into his brown eyes, saw the fierce determination there, and felt something shift inside her chest. This man, who barely knew her, was risking everything to keep her safe. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" James's expression softened. His hands were still on her shoulders, warm through the fabric of her shirt. "Because when I look at you, I see someone worth fighting for," he said quietly. "Because you are brave and strong, and you are trying to protect your child, and that matters. You matter, Eleanor." No one had ever looked at her the way James was looking at her in that moment, like she was something precious and valuable. Before she could think better of it, Eleanor leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his chest. After a moment's hesitation, James wrapped his arms around her, holding her gently while she cried out all the fear and exhaustion of the past weeks. When she finally pulled back, wiping her eyes, James gave her a small, crooked smile. "Better?" he asked. "A little," she admitted. "Good. Because we still have about 30 miles to go, and I would like to get there before dark tomorrow." They reached the Brennan Ranch late the following afternoon. It was a modest spread, a sturdy log house with a barn, corrals, and rolling pasture where horses grazed peacefully. As they rode up the dirt road to the house, a man emerged from the barn, tall and broad-shouldered with red hair. His face broke into a wide grin when he recognized James. "James Dalton," Thomas Brennan called out. "What brings you all the way out here? Last I heard, you were still in Dodge City." "Thomas," James said, dismounting and clasping his friend's hand, "I need a favor, a big one." Thomas's expression grew serious as he took in James's travel-worn appearance and then Eleanor, still mounted and looking exhausted. "Come inside," he said. "Catherine will want to hear this." Over coffee and fresh bread in the Brennans' warm kitchen, James explained everything. Eleanor's situation, Wade Kellerman's pursuit, the shootout with the deputies. Catherine Brennan, a petite woman with dark hair and intelligent eyes, listened without interruption, her gaze frequently moving to Eleanor's face and then to her belly. When James finished, Thomas leaned back in his chair, rubbing his jaw. "Wade Kellerman," he said. "I have heard of him. He has a reputation clear out here. If he is after Eleanor, he will not stop easily." "I know," James said. "That is why I brought her here. Your ranch is remote enough that it will take time for Wade to track her this far if he even can. And I thought maybe Eleanor could stay here at least until the baby comes. After that, we can figure out the next step." "Of course she can stay," Catherine said immediately, reaching over to take Eleanor's hand. "You are welcome here as long as you need. We have an extra room and heaven knows I could use another woman around this place." Eleanor felt tears spring to her eyes again. "I cannot pay you," she said. "I have nothing." "We are not asking for payment," Thomas said firmly. "Any friend of James is a friend of ours. You will stay, help Catherine around the house if you feel up to it, and we will keep you safe." "What about you?" Eleanor asked, turning to James. "What will you do?" James glanced at Thomas, then back at Eleanor. "I was hoping Thomas might have some work for me," he said. "I am good with horses, and I can mend fences, break broncs, whatever needs doing. That way I can stick around, make sure Wade does not track you here." "Is that the only reason you want to stick around?" Thomas asked, a knowing glint in his eye as he looked between James and Eleanor. James's ears turned slightly red, but he met his friend's gaze steadily. "Maybe not the only reason," he admitted. Catherine smiled, squeezing Eleanor's hand. "I think that is settled then. James, you can take the room above the barn. It is not fancy, but it is warm and dry. Eleanor, come with me, and I will show you where you will be staying." Over the next weeks, Eleanor settled into life at the Brennan Ranch. Catherine was as kind as James had promised, treating Eleanor not as a charity case but as a friend and equal. The two women worked together in the house and garden, and Eleanor helped Catherine with the accounts and correspondence, putting her education to good use. Eleanor's belly grew rounder as November turned to December, and she felt the baby move more strongly each day. James worked alongside Thomas, proving himself an invaluable hand with the horses. He had a gift for gentling even the most skittish animals, working with patience and quiet confidence that Eleanor found herself admiring more each day. Every evening, James would find some excuse to come to the house, to deliver fresh milk, to help move something heavy, to ask Catherine a question about dinner. But Eleanor noticed that his eyes always sought her out, checking to make sure she was well. They fell into a pattern of walking together after supper, strolling around the ranch in the growing twilight. At first, they talked about practical things, but gradually, the conversations deepened. James told Eleanor about his childhood, his parents who had struggled to make their farm work, his younger sister who had died at 16 from complications after a back-alley procedure when a local boy got her pregnant and abandoned her. The pain in his voice when he spoke of his sister made Eleanor understand even more clearly why he had been so determined to help her. Eleanor, in turn, told James the full story of Wade Kellerman, how he had courted her with charm and promises, how she had believed him when he said he would marry her, how she had discovered quite by accident that he had a wife in Boston and 2 children he never mentioned. When she had confronted him, Wade had turned cold and threatening, making it clear that if she caused trouble for him, she would regret it. When she realized she was pregnant, she knew she had to run. "I was so foolish," Eleanor said one evening as they stood by the corral watching the horses in the fading light. "I believed his lies. I thought he loved me." "You were not foolish," James said firmly. "He was a skilled liar who abused his position of power. That is not your fault, Eleanor." "None of this is your fault." She looked up at him, this good, steady man who had given up his job and risked his life for her. "I do not know how I will ever repay you for everything you have done," she said softly. James turned to face her fully, his expression serious in the twilight. "I do not want repayment, Eleanor. I want—" He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. "I want you to be happy. I want you and that baby to be safe and have a good life. And I want—" He took a breath. "I want to be part of that life if you will have me." Eleanor's heart began to pound. "James, I am pregnant with another man's child. I am not exactly the kind of woman most men want to court." "You are exactly the kind of woman I want," James said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are brave and smart and kind, and you are fighting for your child with everything you have. That baby is going to be lucky to have you as a mother. And if you would let me, I would be honored to help raise that child, to be a father to him or her in every way that matters." "James," Eleanor breathed, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I love you, Eleanor," James said simply. I think I started falling in love with you that first morning in the hayloft when you looked at me with all that fear and defiance mixed together. And every day since then, I have fallen a little more. I am not asking you to give me an answer now. I know you need time and you have been through hell, but I wanted you to know how I feel. Eleanor reached up and touched his face, feeling the roughness of his stubble under her palm. I do not need time, she said softly. I already know I love you too, James. I think I have loved you since the moment you climbed into that hayloft and told me I was safe. You are the best man I have ever known, and yes, I want you to be part of our lives, both of us. James's face transformed with joy. He cupped her face gently in his calloused hands and kissed her, soft and tender and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling through tears. We should probably tell Thomas and Catherine, Eleanor said, laughing a little breathlessly. They already know, James said with a grin. Catherine told me last week that if I did not hurry up and tell you how I felt, she was going to knock our heads together. That night over supper, James and Eleanor shared their news with the Brennans. Catherine cried and hugged them both, while Thomas clapped James on the back and declared that it was about time. They celebrated with the apple pie Catherine had made that afternoon and talked late into the night about plans for the future. We should get married before the baby comes, James said, holding Eleanor's hand across the table. I want that child to have my name if you are willing. I am willing, Eleanor said softly, more than willing. There is a minister in the town of Cedar Ridge about 20 miles north, Thomas said. Good man, discreet. He would marry you without asking too many questions. What about Wade? Catherine asked quietly. Is Eleanor safe here? What if he tracks her down? He would have to go through me first, James said, his voice hard. And Thomas and half the ranchers in this county once they hear what kind of man he is. I do not think Wade will come this far. He has no real jurisdiction out here, and if he shows his face, I will make sure the local law knows exactly what he is. 2 weeks later, on a cold December morning, James and Eleanor were married in the small church in Cedar Ridge. Catherine served as Eleanor's witness and helped her into a simple blue dress that accommodated her growing belly. Thomas stood up for James, and the minister, true to his word, asked no questions beyond the legal requirements. When James slipped a plain gold band onto Eleanor's finger and kissed her as his wife, Eleanor felt a happiness she had never imagined possible just months before. They returned to the ranch as Mr. and Mrs. James Dalton, and that night, Eleanor moved from the guest room into the room above the barn with James. He was gentle and patient, mindful of her condition, and Eleanor fell asleep in his arms feeling safe and loved in a way she had never experienced before. Christmas came and went, a quiet celebration with the Brennans. James carved a cradle from cedar wood, working on it every evening by lamplight, sanding it smooth and carving a pattern of horses along the sides. Eleanor sewed baby clothes from fabric Catherine gave her, tiny gowns and blankets, each stitch a prayer for the child's safety and health. In early January 1879, on a night when snow was falling soft and thick outside, Eleanor went into labor. Catherine and Thomas's mother, who lived in Cedar Ridge and had delivered dozens of babies, came to help. James paced outside the cabin for hours, nearly wearing a path in the snow, until finally, just before dawn, he heard the thin, strong cry of a newborn. Catherine appeared in the doorway, her face exhausted but smiling. "You have a son," she said, "and Eleanor is asking for you." James entered the warm cabin to find Eleanor propped up in bed, her hair damp with sweat, her face glowing with exhaustion and joy. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had made. James approached slowly, almost reverently, and Eleanor pulled back the blanket to reveal a red-faced infant with a dusting of dark hair and eyes that were trying to focus on the world around him. "Meet your son," Eleanor said softly, her eyes meeting James's. "Our son," James corrected gently, reaching out to touch the baby's impossibly small hand. The infant's fingers curled around James's calloused finger, and James felt his heart expand in his chest. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "I am your papa, and I am going to love you and protect you all your days." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "What should we name him?" she asked. James thought for a moment. "What about Samuel? It was my father's name, Samuel Dalton." "Samuel Dalton," Eleanor repeated, testing the sound. "I love it. Hello, Samuel. Welcome to the world, little one." In the weeks that followed, James threw himself into fatherhood with the same quiet determination he brought to everything else. He changed diapers and walked the floor with Samuel when he fussed, sang off-key lullabies, and stared at his son with an expression of such wonder that it made Eleanor fall even more deeply in love with her husband. Samuel thrived, growing plump and healthy, and Eleanor slowly regained her strength. Spring came to Colorado, melting the snow and bringing green grass and wildflowers. Thomas offered James a permanent position on the ranch, with the promise of a share of the profits if he stayed on. James accepted gratefully, and together, he and Eleanor began to make plans for their future. They would stay at the ranch for another year or two, saving money, and then they would look for a small piece of land of their own, perhaps nearby, where they could build a house and raise Samuel. In April, a rider came to the ranch with news from Kansas. Marshal Wade Kellerman had been arrested by federal authorities for corruption, theft, and murder. His crimes had finally caught up with him, and he was facing a long prison sentence, possibly even the gallows. The charges included the murder of several women who had gone missing over the years, though Eleanor's name was not mentioned. She had simply disappeared, and Wade had apparently decided to cut his losses and not pursue her further west. When Eleanor heard the news, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she had carried for so long she had forgotten what it was like to be without it. That evening, she and James stood on the porch of their cabin, watching Samuel sleep in the cradle James had made, and looked out over the peaceful ranch land. "It is truly over," Eleanor said, leaning against James's solid warmth. "We are really safe." "We are safe," James agreed, wrapping his arms around her. "And we are together, and we have Samuel, and we have a good life ahead of us." Eleanor turned in his arms to face him. "I never thought I would be this happy," she said. "When I was hiding in that hayloft, scared and alone, I could not imagine that life could turn out like this." "I am glad I climbed up that ladder," James said, kissing her forehead. "Best decision I ever made. The years that followed were good ones." James and Eleanor stayed at the Brennan Ranch for 3 years, during which time James became Thomas's partner in the horse-breeding operation. Eleanor helped Catherine start a small school for the ranch children in the area, finally achieving her dream of teaching. Samuel grew into a bright, active little boy who loved horses and followed his father everywhere. In 1882, when Samuel was 3, James and Eleanor purchased a small ranch of their own just 5 miles from the Brennans. It was modest, 200 acres with a creek running through it, but it was theirs. James built a house with his own hands, a sturdy 2-story structure with a wide porch and a view of the mountains. Eleanor planted a garden and set up a small schoolhouse in one of the outbuildings, teaching not just ranch children, but also the children of homesteaders settling in the area. In the summer of 1883, Eleanor gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Catherine Rose after Catherine Brennan. James was present for the birth this time, holding Eleanor's hand through the whole process, and when he first held his daughter, he cried openly. 2 years later, another son arrived whom they named Thomas James. And in 1888, they welcomed another daughter whom they called Sarah after James's mother. The ranch prospered. James proved to have his father's gift for breeding quality horses, and the Dalton Ranch became known throughout Colorado for its reliable stock. Eleanor's school grew, eventually becoming an official schoolhouse for the district, and she took on the role of the official teacher, finally holding the position she had always dreamed of. Samuel grew up strong and capable, inheriting his father's way with horses and his mother's love of learning. He knew from the time he was old enough to understand that James was not his biological father, but it never mattered to him or to anyone else. James was his papa in every way that counted, and the bond between them was as strong as blood. On their 10th wedding anniversary in December 1889, James and Eleanor stood on the porch of their house, watching their 4 children play in the yard. Samuel, now 10, was teaching Catherine, age 6, how to ride while Thomas, 4, tried to climb the corral fence to watch, and baby Sarah toddled after them all. "Can you believe it has been 10 years?" Eleanor asked, leaning against James's side in the comfortable way of long marriage. "Best 10 years of my life," James said, kissing the top of her head. "Though I have to say, when I climbed into that hayloft back in Dodge City, I did not imagine it would lead to all this." Eleanor laughed. "What did you imagine, honestly? I just wanted to help you get away safely. I never imagined that I would fall in love with you. I never imagined that we would build all this together." He gestured to the ranch, the children, the life they had created. "You saved my life that day," Eleanor said softly. You told me I was safe, and you meant it. You have kept me safe every day since." "We kept each other safe," James corrected. "You saved me too, Eleanor. Before I met you, I was just drifting, working one job after another, not really building anything. You gave me purpose. You gave me a family. You gave me everything." Eleanor turned to kiss him, a soft, sweet kiss that still held the spark of their early passion but was deeper now, richer with years of love and partnership. "Mama, Papa," Samuel called from the yard. "Come see. Kathy is doing so well on the horse." Hand in hand, James and Eleanor walked down from the porch to join their children, their hearts full of gratitude for the unexpected path that had led them from fear and danger to this moment of simple, perfect happiness. Eleanor thought back to that desperate girl hiding in the hayloft, terrified and alone, and sent a silent prayer of thanks to whatever Providence had sent James Dalton climbing up that ladder. She had been hiding and scared, and he had found her and told her she was safe. And he had spent every day since then proving those words true, building a life where safety was not just the absence of danger, but the presence of love, partnership, and family. They had built something beautiful together, something that would last not just through their lifetimes, but in the children they were raising and the values they were teaching them. As the sun set over the Colorado mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, the Dalton family stood together in their yard, surrounded by the life they had built through courage, love, and the simple decision of one cowboy to help a woman in need. It was a good life, a life worth all the struggles that had led them here, and they would spend the rest of their days grateful for every moment of it. Years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and celebrations, hardships and harvests. The Dalton Ranch became a fixture in the community, known not just for its quality horses but for the open door that James and Eleanor kept for anyone in need. They had not forgotten what it meant to be desperate and afraid, and they made sure that anyone passing through who needed help found it at their table. Samuel grew into a fine young man, taking over more of the ranch work as James reached his 40s and felt the wear of years of hard labor in his back and knees. In 1895, when Samuel was 16, a family of homesteaders settled on the adjacent property. They had a daughter named Emma, a bright-eyed girl of 15 who loved horses as much as Samuel did. Eleanor watched with knowing eyes as her son fell in love with the neighbor girl, seeing in their young romance echoes of her own unexpected love story. Catherine grew into a spirited young woman with her mother's intelligence and her father's determination. She announced at 14 that she wanted to be a veterinarian, an ambition almost unheard of for women, but James and Eleanor supported her completely, helping her study and arranging for her to apprentice with the doctor in Cedar Ridge who treated animals as well as people. Thomas and Sarah were still young, growing up in a household filled with love and laughter, unaware of how unusual their family story was. They knew their oldest brother had a different father, knew their parents' history in general terms, but it was ancient history to them, as relevant as any other story from before they were born. What mattered was the present, the warmth of their home, and the solid presence of parents who loved each other and them deeply. In 1898, 20 years after that desperate flight from Dodge City, Eleanor stood in her kitchen preparing supper while Sarah, now 10, helped her cut vegetables. Through the window, she could see James in the corral with Thomas, teaching the 14-year-old how to break a young horse to saddle. Samuel was riding in from the far pasture, and Catherine was expected home from her apprenticeship any day now. Eleanor paused in her work, a wave of emotion washing over her so strongly that she had to grip the counter for support. Sarah looked up, concerned. "Mama, are you all right?" "I am fine, sweetheart," Eleanor assured her daughter, smiling through sudden tears. "I am just happy, so very happy." And she was. Against all odds, against every expectation she had held that terrifying night in the hayloft, she had found not just safety but joy, not just survival but a love that had sustained her through 2 decades and would sustain her through all the years to come. She had found James, and together they had built something worth every struggle, every fear, every risk they had taken. That evening, after the children had gone to bed, Eleanor and James sat together on their porch as they had countless nights before, watching the stars emerge over the mountains. James held her hand, his thumb tracing familiar patterns on her palm. "What are you thinking about?" he asked quietly. "About that night in Dodge City," Eleanor said. "About how scared I was and how you climbed up into that loft and told me I was safe. I was thinking about how you kept that promise every single day since then." James pulled her closer, and Eleanor rested her head on his shoulder. "You know what I remember most about that morning," he said. "The way you looked at me, like you wanted to trust me but were too scared to believe anyone could actually help you. And I remember thinking that I would do anything to prove to you that you could trust me, that there were still good people in the world. You did prove it," Eleanor said softly. "Every day you prove it. You are the best man I have ever known, James Dalton. You are the best father our children could have asked for, and I love you more now than I did the day we married." "I love you more too," James replied, kissing her temple. "And I am grateful for every single day we have had together, even the hard ones, because we faced them together." They sat in comfortable silence, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that mattered. Inside the house, their children slept safely, surrounded by love and security. Outside, the ranch they had built together stretched out under the starlight, a testament to hard work, faith, and the power of one man's simple promise. "You are safe now here," and Eleanor was safe. They both were. Safe in their love, safe in their family, safe in the life they had created together. It was more than Eleanor had ever dared to hope for in those dark days of running and hiding. It was everything. As they finally rose to go inside for the night, James paused at the door and looked back at the ranch, his ranch, their ranch. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I used to think that saving you was the best thing I ever did, but I was wrong. The best thing I ever did was love you. Everything good in my life came from that." Eleanor stood on her toes to kiss him, this man who had given her everything. "The best thing I ever did was trust you when you said I was safe," she replied, "and then fall in love with you. Everything else followed from that." They went inside together, closing the door on another peaceful night, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them as they had faced everything else. Together, with love, and with the unshakable foundation they had built starting from that moment in a hayloft when a cowboy climbed up and offered safety to a desperate woman, and she believed him. The years ahead would bring their share of joys and sorrows, as all lives do. But the Dalton family would face them with the strength that came from love freely given and gratefully received, from promises kept and faith rewarded. And when Eleanor and James were old, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, they would still tell the story of how they met, of the hayloft and the cowboy who climbed up with his simple promise, of the love that grew from fear and desperation into something beautiful and lasting. It was a story worth telling, a love worth celebrating, and a life worth living. And it had all begun with those words, spoken with simple conviction in the darkness of a hayloft. "You are safe now here." They were words that James had meant with his whole heart, and they were words that had proven true every day since, building brick by brick the beautiful life they shared. That was the greatest gift either of them could have asked for, and they treasured it until their final days, grateful beyond words for the chance encounter that had changed everything and led them home to each other.